Hello, virtual EN100 students. Yesterday, when I talked to you about some assignments coming up for the next couple of weeks, this is the lecture day. In fact, I kind of talked to the students earlier that this will be the last lecture we have. This is the last thing I give you until September 28th. Next week, I'll walk you through your essays, of course, but September 28th is the next time I actually will give you something brand new. So make sure you do the assignments. Hopefully these PowerPoints will help you understand some of the assignments. So first off, we're going to start off with identifying research. So before you research, you need to identify it. Some questions you need to know is sometimes you need to find information to fill in the gaps in your own knowledge. Sometimes other times you need expert testimony to back up your own points or validate your own authority on the subject. And then other times you just need to provide information for your reader's benefit or to meet the expectations of those who are reading it. So for this particular essay, it's mainly the second one. You're needing it for the second one, a little bit the first one, but mainly the second one. And of course, technically, I guess you were doing it for the third one because the assignment calls for two sources. Like if you have a certain academic journal you're working for or writing for, they expect you to have a certain amount of sources and have certain people that you quote. So questions to consider before you actually start researching is number one, what do you know? Number two, what you don't know? Number three, what is your level of credibility? Number four, what does your audience know? And then number five, what your audience is expecting. The big thing we're looking for is source credibility. Not all information is equally valid. Just because something fits, you shouldn't automatically use it. So ask some questions about the source. So what type of publication is it? Different types of publications will offer different types of information and have different levels of objectivity. So what type of publication is it? If it is a newspaper, magazine, website, they're trying to sell copies, generate page views, publish stories that will draw in the reader's attention. They will use sensationalism. They'll adjust what they publish so that they make their advertisers look good. So they are not necessarily the best source of information. That means you can't, that you shouldn't. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, but just keep these things in mind before you actually do use them. Be cognizant of it. And then like reference books, they tend to be unbiased and they only provide a brief overview of the information. Academic journals are the all-star here. They publish information based on valid academic research in order to further discuss the topics at hand. This is going to be the one that you're going to really hammer down on and focus on is academic journals throughout all of college. They're the ones that most things want you to cite sources from. There's different, what is the specific publication? Different publications carry different levels of credibility. Like the Journal of Medical Association is well known and has a respected history of publishing credible information. Some obscure medical journal from Eastern Europe is less strict about what they will publish. And so they follow rules very loosely, so they'll publish anything. Where the American Medical Association has their credibility they have to worry about. Then you also need to keep in mind that different publications carry different biases. Like the New York Times has a very liberal bias. The New York Post has a conservative bias. Then you need to ask questions about the author. What are their biases? If you read an editorial on the same topic, but one is written by Rachel Maddow and the other by Tucker Carlson, you can probably guess that they will have wildly different views on the topic. And in all likelihood, neither will present a useful perspective on their dogmatic political views due to their dogmatic political views. So authors' biases will get in the way. Also, are they credible? Like, look at their academic, personal, or professional credentials. Lots of people claim to be experts on the topic, but very few are. Make sure you're trusting the right people. Or like this, like example, if you were writing about education and I was writing about education, like I am a more credible source. I have a lot more personal experience. I have fancy pieces of paper back there that make me a credible source. Where you do not have that experience yet. Not to say you won't one day, but right now your credit isn't where it needs to be. So you wouldn't be as good of a source to use compared to me when it comes to that. Are there any evident biases? Remember those biases I mentioned with both publications and authors? If you see those, you want to run the other way in most situations. The stronger the bias, the faster you'll run. If an author is entrenched in a certain viewpoint, you won't be unable to effectively step outside of that to look at the topic being discussed, fairly look at the topic being discussed. They really aren't adding much value. There are certain expectations, but typically you want to avoid overly biased writing. Those expectations would be if you use something that's super biased, you're going to have to balance it out with the other side that is also super biased. So it's easier if you find something more in the middle instead of going to the extremes. Are there any evident biases? There are certain exceptions, but in general, you want to avoid heavily biased type writing. When it was published is another question you need to ask. Material's publication date is important for establishing recency. Different fields have different needs for how certain something needs to be in order for it to be considered recent. But as a general rule, try not to go beyond a decade without a specific reason. It doesn't mean anything older than 10 years is useless. In fact, much of it is quite helpful, but a lot has changed in those 10 years and may have rendered that information outdated. Whenever I wrote my giant research project for my master's, a key thing when it came to like free writing was published in the 80s. But you could see that information published in the 80s, and I found sources that kind of like built off of that. So I could still bring in the 80s stuff and say, hey, here's the information that was built off of this, even though it's super old. So it's not completely useless, just the more recent, the better. And then has it been peer reviewed? And for some reason that, all right, has it been peer reviewed? Peer review is a research setting that means that experts in the field have read and researched and agree that the academic has academic merit, should be discussed further. This doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with it. If they think it's correct, but they do say that it's worth additional discussion. All right. Then this is so this sort of peer review only happens within academic journals and academic books. So that's where you're going to find this debate, this academic discourse going on. Other sources are typically more interested in getting page views and selling copies or persuading people. So they're not as credible when it comes to this, where academic journals are focused on pushing forward the idea. While you research, remember the STAR method. STAR method is sufficiency, typicality, accuracy, and relevancy. Sufficiency, is there enough information to work with? Do I have enough information in front of me that I can write accurately on this? Typicality, do enough experts agree that this is commonly accepted information? Accuracy, is this information you're getting valid and accurate? And then relevant, is this actually relevant to the topic that you are talking about? Like, is this worthwhile? All right, let's see. I'll exit out of that and see what happens. There we go. All right, now that was the first thing I was going to talk to you about. Here's the next thing. We go from doing research. Now we got to put that research into our paper. And so we're going to integrate the research. So always make sure that you cite the information you integrate from an outside source, connecting your information to your discussion of a topic. Make sure your audience understands why it was meaningful for your discussion. You transition in and out of the source material effectively. Don't just cite for cite purposes. Make sure you explain why you brought this information into the paper. What is the relevance of it? Don't just drop it and leave it completely out of nowhere. Now, summaries use your own words, condense a large amount of information down into a brief space. They hit the high points and give a brief overview. Summaries are great for integrating the ideas of large chunks of information into your essay when details aren't so important. Summaries give your reader the basic gist of stuff, and then they move on. Think of summaries as like the greatest hits. You take something, you kind of take the greatest hits out of it, and then you give them the summary. Paraphrases. When you paraphrase something, you cover everything. Summaries are only concerned with the main idea. Paraphrases are concerned with the details. Paraphrases must be a rough equivalent length and detail to the original. Paraphrases are good for taking small but important bits of information from the original source. If you wouldn't want to paraphrase more than a couple sentences at a time. Think of it as like a cover song. All right, so you don't paraphrase, you're not going to cover an entire album, but you would cover a song off of the album. And so you put your own spin on it. That's kind of what paraphrasing is. Now, paraphrasing don't. You just don't change X out of every word. That is plagiarism. Now, quotations, they retain the author's original words and are denoted by quotation marks. If you quote somebody, make sure that you use their exact words and not just a rough approximation. If you misquote someone, it could be a very big deal. Also don't heavily rely on quotes. Often use a quote when it's important to see what the words of the author's exact words for some reason. And these two reasons are eloquent phrasing, so they phrase it in a very specific way, or to verify this is exactly the author's idea. This is what they said. Those are the only two. Like, here's the unique way that they said this, or here's exactly what they said, so you can know this is exactly what they said. If it's not for one of those two reasons, a paraphrase or summary will work even better. Another reason why not to quote a lot: constantly inserting other people's words into your essays, inserting their voice and style too. It can be jarring for the reader since they will be switching back and forth between styles and voices. Summaries and paraphrases are more effectively demonstrate that you actually understood the source, what the source was saying, and how it relates to your discussion. You had to understand it before you had to put it in your own words. Both are good reasons. Number two is the main reason. If you can summarize and paraphrase it, you understood it. Citations. So anytime you bring in outside information, you have to cite it. So any outside information you use, whether it is quoted, paraphrased, or summarized, it doesn't matter. You summarize it, cite it, quote it, cite it, paraphrase it, cite it. You have to cite anytime you bring in outside information. And there's two parts to a citation. You have the in-text citation and the works cited entry. You need both of them in order for it to be a citation. Now, let's start off with the in-text citation. These let your reader know when you have something, you use something from a source at the time that you use it. There are two types of citations. You have a running citation and a parenthetical citation. Both of these citations will use the author's name and the page number when available. That's also part of the reason why academic journals are kind of valued more in this type of research, is because academic journals will always have a page number associated with them. So running in-text citations, in this in-text citation, it includes the author's name and possibly the title of the work in this text of the sentence. It is usually the first time that when you use the source. The page number follows in parentheses. So here's an example. In his book, I'm Scott Norman, look at me, Scott Norman says, "My water bottle is the coolest. Anyone who disagrees is blamed." Page 180. He says that on page 180. No, you only include the title of the work and the author's first name the first time you use the information in the text. Every subsequent usage will suffice with the author's last name and the page number. Parenthetical citations, in this in-text citation, includes the author's name and the page number in parentheses. This works best for summaries and paraphrases, but should never be used for a direct quote, since the reader won't know how it's who's talking until the very end. Here's an example. Some people think so highly of their water bottles that they will result to name calling if anyone disagrees with them. Norman 180. In-text citations never refer to the author by their first name only. You will only include their first along with their last name the first time you use the source. Every time thereafter, you will refer to the author using their last name. So mainly use their last name. Now let's talk about the works cited page. So you have the in-text citation. You still need the works cited page. It's the second half of the citation. The works cited page is where you get the information necessary to connect the in-text citations to the articles and books, etc., that you're referenced to in the essay. How to cite entries will change from source type to source type. Luckily, the internet and then your textbook will give you all the details that you need to include for your works cited page. Now, here's the things you need to make sure for your works cited page. It needs to be arranged alphabetically by the author's last name. Each entry is single spaced with a hanging indent, and then you double space between the entries. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk to you about is how to find sources. So how to find sources. That's what we're going to be talking about. So how to navigate an academic journal database. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. So if you are a CMO student, you'll do something different. But first, we'll just talk about the free academic journal databases. You type in free academic journal databases into Google and brings you up all kinds of stuff. JSTOR is really good, but they only give you a certain amount that's free. I think I've pulled up, yes, the DOGAJ, which is this website right here. This is a good one that you could use. There's also the Journ, which is this one that you could use. And then Google Scholar is also a free one that you can use for that one. if you are a CMO student and you are doing this activity, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the Kent Library. Kent Library right here. You'll click on the Kent Library homepage. You could also type in library.cmo.edu. Go to articles and databases, A through Z. And you do databases A through Z, and all these are academic journal databases that you can use. They are behind a paywall, but if you hit like Academic Search Complete, which is a good one, or JSTOR, which is a good one, it'll ask you to enter your SE key and password. You click sign in, and you get unlimited access to that academic journal database as soon as it loads. It's loading, voila. And so you can search to your heart's delight. Let's say that you want to search trees. And so you type in trees, you click search. There's a bunch of different types of Boolean searches you can do if you want. You can limit it to just full text. You can look at just academic journals too, and that will help narrow down what you are looking at. And then you can click here and actually read the whole article. The nice thing about these academic journal databases is that they also provide a citation that you can use. If you click, I believe over here is the citation. That's Export Manager. Yep, right there is the citation format. You can choose and just copy and paste from there. Make sure you paste without formatting, and you can read the whole article. Voila, crazy, right? All right, so that's what you're going to be needing to do for the research assignment. All right, that's all I have for this lecture. If you have any questions, please email me, pdavidson@cordial.k12.mo.us, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.